Jesse's favorite song?
Yeah, I love it.
One day we'll have an intro.
Jesse and Jeremy on the mic, 3 outlaws on a mission, man, it feels so right. We were doing hard time, now we're dropping rhymes. Turn the hustle into hope, redefining our prime. From the prison yard to podcast fame, taking back our power, no more shame. We used to wear numbers, now we wear names. Laughing at our haters, cause we changed the game.
All right, Wednesday night in the house with Erin Jaeger. So the best part about this is we have absolutely 0 viewers now because our number 1 viewer, Erin, is sitting in here with us. So awesome to have you here, Erin. I know we're all excited. We actually talked about it all week. Right? It's really, I know all 3 of us look up to you, right? The path that you've been on, the where you've been able to achieve and just grow and lead people. The feedback that we've gotten on this podcast from people that have worked directly underneath you. They talked about the amount of work you were able to get done and then still give some feedback on notes, like that kind of stuff. Just, it goes a long way, right? I think all 4 of us here are pretty driven. So hearing stuff like that resonates with us.
I want to second that. I have never heard one bad thing about you in the community. Everybody has nothing but great things to say to you, say about you.
That's so nice.
100%.
I don't think I've ever wanted to promote somebody so much. I mean, like, I'm one of your biggest fans.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Aaron's awesome.
So we're actually here to have you break all your confidentiality. HIPAA does not have no rule here.
But we have no viewers, so
Yeah,
nobody
so
can
it
hear
doesn't
it.
matter. Yeah.
If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it. But it's awesome. And I remember we had actually connected, I believe, on LinkedIn. I didn't even know that you knew Jeremy or Jesse at that point in time. And we went and met at a coffee shop in Tempe super early in the morning. And I remember that morning you said, I'll be in there in a few. I just have to go to my meeting. So I was expecting Erin to show up after her meeting. But when I pulled up, she was already there in her car attending her meeting virtual, which to me, I didn't even know that was like an option in the 12-step world. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. She's handling her business. And how long have you been in recovery?
12 years.
Marlo, what's up? 12 years?
12 years.
And how many meetings a week do you go to now?
Probably about 5 on average.
That's some dedication right there.
Yeah, I try really hard to go to at least 1 in person, and then the rest of them I do on Zoom.
That's awesome. That's awesome. 12 years in and still doing that amount of work.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I was telling Jesse before we got on here, actually I was telling all of you, I ran into a guy yesterday and he was 13 years into his sobriety when he relapsed. And then obviously I met him after that while we were incarcerated. And he talked about those dangers, right, of getting comfortable and thinking you've beat that and what that work looks like and the importance of continuing to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why you do that?
Yes, absolutely. Because there have been like many times throughout my recovery where I drifted away from the program where I'm like, I got a little bit of time. I'm really busy. I'll do that later or whatever. But then I feel it. Like I can feel the difference when I am not putting my higher power first and foremost. When I remove myself from my support network, when I'm not being of service to others, it's very evident in my life. I'm very chaotic.
No.
So yeah, I have to be very diligent.
So you put up a good front.
What? Go fuck yourself.
Oh. Every time Erin says go fuck yourself tonight, we'll
Just keep it on repeat.
It's actually
Leave it up there.
a blessing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a rite of passage. Absolutely a rite of passage. So I remember it was a Sunday and somehow Jesse is able to, anything moving, labor related, he is able to avoid this. I don't know how. It's a gift that he has. But myself, Jeremy, right? Did you help move Erin into her office?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, it was me, you, and
Eric.
She
And
had
Eric.
Eric, yeah, we built some IKEA stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Team
Team sport.
77 screws.
Yeah.
In a box.
Dude, but it's
Yeah.
a kick-ass coffee bar, though.
Yeah.
It is a
It
kick-ass
is.
coffee
It
bar.
is.
My
It
clients
is.
love it.
Do they?
They do.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so we went and helped Erin move into her office. It was a Sunday, and I didn't even know what you did really for a living at that point. Like I knew you worked at Axiom and you played a role there, obviously, but I didn't really know what that looked like. So what do you do for work?
Well, at that time, I was working for Axiom. I was the clinical director for the observation unit, the detox unit, and the men's residential.
Okay.
And then I was for a long time doing some EMDR at the residential too, which was super fun.
Nice.
Yeah, I was doing that. And then I had my little private practice as a side hustle. So I was doing that. And then I was going to meetings. And then I was volunteering at the senior center. And I was going to school and running myself into the ground.
What were you going to school for?
Getting like a little business certificate.
Oh, nice.
The Mesa Business Builder or something like that. They give me a scholarship to take basic business classes.
Oh, I love it.
Because when I started my private practice, I was like, oh, I know clinical. I'm just going to like wing the rest of it, which was not a good approach.
Right.
So now I'm learning that like, I don't know shit about business. So I'm trying to get all those like foundational principles to be more successful.
Awesome.
I think there was a time that you were pretty much overworked, and I was really sick, and I called you, and I was coughing. You're like, "Can you do me a favor?" And I'm like, "What's up?" Come sneeze in my hand. I need a break. Come, just sneeze
that.
all over my face, so I can take a break, and I can be sick, and I can be at home, and I
Yeah.
can,
Because I felt guilty calling out if I wasn't actually sick. So I had to really get sick.
It was pretty funny.
They have, I think it's called PTO, that you can actually
Yeah.
build
they
up
do
and
have
take
that.
on your own. It's
Yeah.
hard to take that, right?
It is. It is.
Definitely. That's
So, Erin, tell us about EMDR.
So that's what I do at my private practice. So in November, I quit Axiom and I just do my private practice now. So I have an office in Mesa and I do EMDR therapy for anybody who has trauma or co-occurring stuff that goes with it.
so for people that have no idea about anything clinical, EMDR, right? It's a pretty big acronym. What's that mean?
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
Okay.
So in normal counseling, you talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, and you stay in the cognitive parts of your brain. And for trauma specifically, that's not super effective. So you might get a little bit of relief from that, but you're not going to usually clear it completely out unless you get into the processing parts of your brain. So eye movement, I use a light bar for that. And then I also use tactile stimulation to stimulate the brain to force it to process the things that are unprocessed. So that's what I do every day.
To stimulate the brain to force it to process the things that it won't?
Yes, because the trauma, if it's unprocessed, it's kind of just stuck in your brain.
Right, which triggers a lot of fight or flight.
Yeah. There's all kinds of ways that comes out. It could be nightmares or flashbacks or depression or anxiety or trust issues or self-esteem issues or relationship problems.
Or a road to nowhere.
All of it.
That's pretty intense. I didn't even know EMDR was a thing. Like I'd never even heard of it until I started getting into recovery and being around therapists, meeting you, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And to hear it forces the brain.
To process the things that are unprocessed, like unhealed, unresolved.
So does that bring that up emotionally?
Yes.
It does.
Yes. So most of the time in the session, the person is usually very elevated. They're either sad or crying or mad or angry or shaking or whatever. It's super intense. So I always warn people ahead of time, like, this is going to suck. This is going to be really unpleasant. But I prepare them, they have to have some good coping skills on board. They have to know how to regulate to some degree to be able to get through it. So my clients are rock stars. They're so brave.
Yeah, so right after they're done, and it's a series of sessions, right? Then they revert back to therapy. And from a cognitive point of view, it's easier to rest in that space as a result of that treatment. Does that make sense, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So when somebody's in therapy, for what you're saying is that it's really hard for them to cross that bridge, but EMDR can help them cross that bridge and then, look at it from a better point of view.
Yeah, they get more clarity. They get healing and understanding and peace and insight that they didn't have before because they were looking at the world through a trauma lens,
Right.
right? It's like dirty glasses. Like you can't see clearly if your glasses are dirty, right? So it's kind of the same thing. So we're clearing away the glasses so that they can see accurately the situation and themselves and the people around them and their current safety level and things like that.
I got a question for you. So it's been my experience that many people in recovery have experienced trauma. So how say I've experienced some trauma, how long does it take to work through something like that? Like say I'd experienced some stuff as a child and I wanted to come see somebody like you. How many sessions would it take to be able to actually work through some of that stuff?
It's pretty impossible to predict because it depends on how much trauma you've had, as well as like how much different types of trauma you've had and how honest you're willing to be, right? Because I have a lot of clients who are tough guys, right? And so they try to stay super like closed and all, they don't want the emotion to come up, and they take a lot longer because they're essentially getting in their own way,
Right.
right? Like the faster you let it come up and out and deal with it, the faster you're going to get relief.
Like a fart.
Yeah.
So when you say deal with it, does that just mean talk about it and do your little like the light therapy stuff? I mean, how does that help it?
So the light therapy gets the brain going.
Okay.
And we do that for a little bit. Then we talk for a little bit about what came up. Then they go back to the bilateral stimulation, and then we talk about it. And that's what kind of like works through it throughout the session.
So if I walked into your office as a client and I sit down and we're going to start our session, like what do I expect? What does that look like?
The first session is just like getting the history, getting our treatment plan in place.
Right.
What is it that you need to work on? Then after that, we start the bilateral stimulation with the talking alternate. And we do that for as many sessions as we need to get through everything. And I measure the progress based on their reported distress. So there's scales, right? I'll say, what's your distress level on a scale of 0 to 10? And as soon as we get it down, then we know that we've worked out that part, and then we start to incorporate the positive cognitions. So whatever the negative cognitions were, they get processed out, and we replace new neural pathways with positive stuff.
So statistically, what's the success rate on something like that?
I don't know the success rate, but it's pretty high.
It varies.
Because EMDR
Yeah.
is like one of the most effective
Yeah.
things, especially for PTSD, but it could be used for all kinds of stuff.
I'm having a hard time like picturing it. So do I put like goggles on? Like I literally have no
I
idea.
mean, you can wear goggles anytime.
No, I think like the bilateral stimulation comes from the left, right?
Well,
Right.
it's a light bar. So like
Right.
imagine like a T.
Right.
And on the top of the T, a light goes back and forth.
Oh, okay.
And while your eyes are going back and forth, the things in your hands are buzzing alternately. And that's what gets both hemispheres of
That's
your brain
what-
going.
That's what I was
Right.
looking for. I
Yes.
didn't know what the process
Yes,
looked like
yes.
at all.
So Vander Kolk, I read his book, The Body Keeps the Score. In that, he specifically highlights the REM stage, right, of processing
Yeah.
when we sleep,
Yeah.
right? What is the relation to that? Like,
Well, they think that that's what is working, right? So like when you're sleeping and you have the REM sleep, your brain is processing.
and the eyes
Right.
are moving back and forth.
Yeah. And so it kind of mimics that. When you're purposely making your eyes go back and forth, it helps the processing, similar to sleep.
Because
It
that's what
hasn't
we're
been
doing at night,
proven,
right?
but
We're
yeah.
we're like sleeping and we're processing all
Yes.
the information, our whole life story, while we're sleeping.
Yeah, and I also tell my clients too, like you might have weird dreams while this is happening. That's kind of like a common side effect, I guess you could say.
Right.
Like they might have strange dreams or vivid dreams or dreams of the material that we're working with. That's kind of common.
And I can't quite give a number, but Vander Kolk highlighted, the sexual abuse trauma and wartime trauma and its benefit as a result of EMDR. And it was quite substantial. So it's definitely a good book to.
Yeah.
So Erin's got a lot of fans on here. Callie Rogers, Nate Shepard, what's going on? Angelo Lopez said hello.
Hi.
Petrosor McCoy. Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're here with Erin, the world famous Erin Jaeger from OHR Counseling, OHR, talking EMDR therapy.
Yeah, and let's back it up just a little bit. You had mentioned at the beginning that you're in recovery. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how your story started, and how you got to where you're at today?
Limited disclosure, by the way.
As much as you care to share.
So I actually initially wanted to be a counselor because many people in my family have either some kind of addiction or some kind of mental illness, right? And so I was like, oh, I understand this. This all makes sense to me. I would be a great counselor. And as I was in the midst of getting all that done, I kind of realized I also was an alcoholic, which is not part of my plan. That was not supposed to go down that way.
Dang education.
Yeah. So At first it was just like, well, at the time I was like in my 20s and I'm Irish and it was kind of just like normal, right? Like I kind of blended in.
Absolutely.
But, through a series of events, I realized like, oh no, I actually don't have control over this whatsoever. So that was kind of a wrench that I wasn't expecting.
And you worked in the service industry too, right?
Yeah, I was a waitress. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I was working
In
Monday
Boston,
through
right?
Friday doing assessments, and then I was working Thursday through Sunday nights waitressing. So I was running myself into the
Making
ground
real
for
money.
a long time.
Making real money.
Making real money. Yeah.
At an Irish pub, which
Yeah.
is where I got sober.
Yeah.
I was still working in the Irish pub when I got sober, which was also kind of awkward. I don't recommend that as a path to recovery.
So
Right.
early sobriety, what did that look like for you when you first wanted to get over that initial hump of stopping your alcoholism and your drinking? What were the steps that you had to take early on to be able to accomplish that?
Oh, I
What
was
did that look like?
such a psycho in the beginning. So I went to AA because I thought that was like the way to do it, right? But when I got there, I had a huge thing against God. Like I didn't want any part of any spirituality. I also didn't want to get a sponsor or do the steps because who has time for all that? And I didn't want to share in meetings because I don't want people knowing my business. So it wasn't really working too well for me, right?
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, man, AA kind of sucks. I thought this was going to work. And then I thought, well, I'm not actually doing all that they're saying to do. Like maybe I should like give it a fair shot. And then I can say for certain, like this doesn't work. Right. Like I literally did it just to say it didn't work. And so I did everything like to the T. I got my sponsor. I did everything they said and blah, blah, blah. And lo and behold, it worked. Oh. So I, through all
Shocker.
that process, right? Go figure. Go figure. So through that process, I also kind of found like my version of a higher power, which is crucial in my life, at least. I needed that to proceed. But that first beginning time, I put down the alcohol, but didn't really have anything substantial to replace it. So I was like pretty psycho. I was kind of nutty back then.
Yeah.
Like even more now, like more than I am now. So
That's
imagine
saying
that.
something. Yeah. That's saying
Imagine
something.
that. Yeah.
So what did that process look like of changing the way that you think? Like once you got away from the substance, the alcohol, and you started coming back to being normal, whatever that is, how did that?
I'm not sure I've achieved normal yet.
Yeah, what did that process
Have you
look
met
like?
Aaron?
What did that process look like,
Would you
though,
like
of
to
learning to change your thinking and your thought process, your emotions and stuff?
So
Deal
it
with that.
came from doing AA as it's laid out in the big book, along with counseling. So I was also doing outpatient counseling because I had too much pride to go into a program like I should have. So I was doing outpatient counseling to work on like my trauma history and all of that, and doing AA properly, finally, and getting that higher power. It kind of just opened my eyes to different things, right? Because like throughout my life, I had like kind of a crazy life a little bit. It could have been worse, but could have been a lot better too. And so throughout my life, I was like, well, obviously God doesn't care about me, or else like none of this would be happening, right? So that was why I was against all of that. But then through the program, I kind of came to realize like I was really very protected, like throughout all the crazy stuff I've seen and been through and whatever. Like nothing really terrible ever happened to me that could have and probably should have. And so I started to look at the higher power differently, right? Like just because he wasn't doing what I wanted him to be doing doesn't mean he
Right.
wasn't there.
Absolutely.
Right? So that was like the turning point for me where I started to look at everything differently.
It's a great place to get there when you start having those realizations. I struggled with that too. Right? I'm like, oh, it's just me. I'm on my own.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And once I started opening my mind a little bit to just maybe there's somebody else in control.
Yeah.
It's so blatantly obvious. And then, like you said, having the lives where crazy stuff happened in the past. I look back, I'm like, how did I get out of that alive? How did I get
Right.
out of that alive? How am I not in prison for the rest of my life? How do I not,
Seriously.
even with using dirty needles in prison? I didn't end up with HIV. Like, I shared needles with every single person. Anybody had a needle, I would share it with.
Yeah.
And to be able on this side of things and look back and say that I wasn't protected,
Yeah.
like universe, God, whatever it is you want
Whatever
to call
it
it,
is.
something's going
Yeah.
on. Somebody's looking out.
You call it paranoid schizophrenia all you want, but whenever I did something wrong, it was like, I told you not to do that. So it like pops up out of nowhere, like, I forewarned you, you moron.
Absolutely.
That's so awesome.
it's like, how many times I got to tell you?
Yeah.
Hello, McFly.
So now you made that shift, right? You
Yeah.
had a very successful position. You were in a leadership role, clinical director at
No,
Axiom.
no, back then I was still like a tech. When I was getting sober, I was still a tech and a waitress. So I
Right.
wasn't in any kind of powerful position.
But like when you recently left Axiom,
Oh,
that,
yeah,
that
yeah,
was
yeah.
in the
I was
last few
clinical
months,
director.
right?
November.
It's hard to walk away from a job where you know you have a paycheck, you're making however much you're making enough to pay the rent, you got a car, you know how much money's coming in. You're able to live accordingly, right? Most of us.
Yeah.
You know, I do have credit cards and get a little
Yeah.
wild, but we're able to stay in that range. We have that, which is I think the worst thing in the world, that comfortability. Right?
Yeah.
That's what really kills us. But something clicked and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to build my business. It's yours, right? That
Yeah.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I love. I'm strung out on entrepreneurship. It's my favorite thing that I ever stick in my arm nowadays. And to see you start chasing your dreams that way and to take that step back, to take those risks, to get out of your comfort zone and say, oh shit, let me figure this out. Oh, by the way, I know nothing about business, right?
Yeah.
That's a harsh
Surprise,
realization
yeah.
in the middle of entrepreneurship.
Right. And I loved Axiom. I mean, yeah, like it was a steady paycheck, which of course I appreciated, but I also really loved Axiom. Like I loved my staff. I had the best staff on earth, I feel like. And I loved what we were doing there. But with all the hours that I was working, I mean, I was getting burnt out. I was getting really tired.
Right.
You know, and I started like at some point, it was shortly after I did my open house. I did my open house in November. I'm sorry, October. And in October, I was having so much fun that day. Like I was like running around like crazy and socializing with everyone and like talking about what I was doing. And I was having so much fun. And I didn't even realize how much fun I was having until after it was all over. I was looking through my pictures that we were taking and I was like, I look so happy. I don't remember being that happy in so long. And so then it kind of like opened my eyes to like, why am I killing myself for a company that I don't even own? When I have a company that I'm neglecting, right? Like this is what I really want to be doing. And it just kind of clicked, you know? And so it was really hard to walk away from there, but it was time. You know, I had prayed on it extensively and I felt peace about the decision. And so like if I'm praying about something and I feel peace about this decision, then I know that it's probably the right thing.
You can tell when you're in the flow, right? When
Yeah.
things are supposed to happen. You can also tell when you're being lazy or in that comfort zone, or
Yes.
you know, you feel that.
Yeah.
I got a cookie that day because my GPS, for whatever reason, took me to a completely wrong address.
But wasn't that cookie worth it?
It was absolutely
It was a
worth
good cookie.
It was an awesome cookie.
And seeing Erin that day, even at the tail end with that happiness hangover, so to speak, right? You were still glowing, you were still happy.
Yeah.
It's just seeing you take that chance and do that is absolutely phenomenal. That was also a day Jesse didn't wait for me to show up. So just another put that out there.
Just to
Jesse.
be clear, he was 3 hours late.
I was
True story.
I was 15 miles away, looking at the walls, wishing I could be there, like and
Excuses.
unhappy. Yeah.
So, Erin, you've come a long way from when you were in your addiction or alcoholism, whatever you want to call it, to working your way all the way up to being a clinical director and now having your own practice. I know that a lot of people that are early in recovery always tell me, like, I don't want to get sober because I'm not going to be able to have any fun.
Mm.
You know, so
Yeah,
my question to
right.
you would be, what do you do these days for fun to, like, what would you say to somebody that's new in recovery that says, well, I don't want to get sober because sober's going to be boring?
Well, you have to do the things that you liked to do before you got addicted, right? Like everybody has, like when you're a little kid, you have fun, right? You do stuff that you like. You have to find out if you still like those things or if you have to try new things. So
That's a great look back.
that was part of like what I used to do at Witten House, where I used to have fun Fridays, and it was purposely for that. Like I had a couple, like the one reason was that I programmed them hard all week and I wanted to give them a break at the end of the week. That was like the one thing. like they were in groups all day.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing. But also I wanted them to learn what they liked, because a lot of them were using since
Yeah.
they were super little and they literally didn't know
I have
what they
no
liked.
idea.
So I would do
Absolutely.
different stuff with them. I'd take them out in nature. I'd take them to museums. I'd take them to sports games. I'd take them bowling or whatever. And that was why, like, I wanted them to figure that stuff out, you know, and I wanted to trigger them a little. I wanted them to see somebody drinking in the next lane over at the bowling alley and
Yeah.
deal with that, you
Right.
know, because if you shelter them for 90 days and then set them free, like, I don't know that they're going to have the skills, right? So, like, I want to kind of slowly introduce them to that. But
I like that idea.
That's something we hear too. Like we work, obviously we're in the prisons a lot, and the guys are, well, you know, my whole run's getting high. Like, what do you think it looks like out there? Dude?
Yeah.
There's a 5-minute walk. I don't give a shit what restaurant I'm at. I can go find a fentanyl pill.
Yeah.
God forbid I stop at a bus stop,
Yeah.
you know, or it doesn't get any easier.
Yeah.
In fact, it gets harder because now I don't have my buddy who lives next to me who knows I'm sober, and you got that. Even if it's fake accountability,
I
even
was
if you don't
fishing
give
down
a
at the
shit.
river bottom.
Yeah.
And I look over, dude's just getting his tray.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, like,
Yeah, it's good to have.
what is going on?
Good to have those experiences, man.
It is.
You just got to try new stuff. If you don't know what you like, just try stuff until you find it out and do it.
And
Yeah.
that comes up so much, right? I remember, and I bring this up often when I never really like said, hey, I'm going to get into recovery. Right? I just wanted to get sober. So kind of like you said, you don't recommend getting sober in an Irish pub. My recovery plan was doing drugs less, right? I'm just not going to get high that much. And fast forward, it ended up me with long-term sobriety, thankfully, you know?
Yeah.
But I remember when they came in with that peer support and they asked me, what do you do for fun? I literally had no idea, but I had tried pickleball on the prison yard a couple of days before because we got a rec set thing. And I was like, oh yeah, pickleball. I was 40 years old at the time and had no idea what I do for fun. And it's something I'm still learning now. I talk to Ashley about it all the time. Like, I'm like the social stuff, like this stuff I can do, the work stuff I can do. I can go out and do events and you know, stay in my work mode easily.
Yeah.
But like just to go do something for fun, I'm still not good at that.
Yeah.
So I kind of put that on her, like, hey, force me into these situations. I
Yeah.
might bitch and moan, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, now that I'm not working 100 hours a day, like I've been purposely trying to socialize more, and it's
Nice.
awesome. Like,
Yeah, you did.
it's
You
like
kicked
I'm a
it. You
person
kicked it
again.
into our thread for this Friday night.
Hell yeah,
Yeah,
we're doing a
yeah.
Batman escape room. Like,
Yeah.
what could be cooler than that?
That is pretty cool.
I know.
You did that? Oh, you're
We're
going to
doing
do
that
it.
Friday.
Oh, nice.
Mhm.
Nice. That's
You and
pretty
Ashley are
awesome.
invited if you want to come.
I'm in the prisons Friday nights, but thank you.
All right.
I appreciate the
There'll
offer.
be more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really cool because a lot of times on here, obviously we've had a retired police officer, we've had who I don't believe ever had substance use issues or alcoholism. We've had an author who's been sober for 18 years
18,
actually, Jason Tierney. He's in like the dental sleep field, right?
Yeah.
We have people that are just coming out of addiction, people that are just coming out of prison. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you're our first therapist,
Oh,
our first clinician.
okay.
So let's talk about this because in the recovery world, in a lot of organizations, there's a clear disconnect between peer supports, right? Which at the end of the day, that's how I consider myself, and the clinicians, right? Whether it's coming from the peers, all the clinicians don't have this, that, or the other. You can't learn in a book, or if it's the clinicians, they know everything because they learned it in a book, or whatever that looks like. How do you deal with that stuff at work? Has that come up for you? Have you ever had to have a conversation about?
The clients, the clients can tell, like
Right.
for sure. Like they know who's been through stuff, like
Right.
and who hasn't. You know, I mean, addiction's weird because you can and I agree with this too. I think a counselor who's been through it is going to be more effective than a counselor who hasn't. But like, does that translate to everything? Like, if you have schizophrenia, does your counselor have to have schizophrenia, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to translate to anything else except addiction. It seems important because I think addiction is so not logical. Like, if you read it in a book, I don't know that you can really understand it,
Right.
right? And so I prefer to have staff who have been through it. But I mean, of course, that's, can't be a deal breaker. But I do think that the staff who have been through it are more effective than those who haven't, generally, overall.
Okay, cool. And interesting perspective. I have a family and children's therapist. I forgot what her role was, but she was credentialed, got her master's, did all that stuff. Tori La Rochelle. And as far as I know, she didn't have any addiction issues. And she trained me in peer support. And some of the most valuable stuff
Mhm.
I learned from her, someone with less, because we all have trauma at the end of the day.
Oh,
I don't care what you call it. If you had the perfect child, something
Yeah,
happened to you, you know what a shitty day feels like.
right.
And it's something we're actually starting to talk about now in like the HR movement with changing HR guidelines and the blanket approach to barring everybody that's got this criminal conviction. And I was explaining I had met with some HR people a few weeks ago, I was like, imagine having every time you go for a job to talk to strangers about one of the worst days in your life, one of the worst moments in your life. Thankfully, I'm still working on it, right? I'm still processing it. I'm far from healed. I'm better than I was, but I still got a ways to go. But a lot of us aren't. A lot of us haven't even thought about it, put it on the back burner, denied it, resisted, whatever you want to call it. Now they go to a job interview, they have to talk about it. And they know they're most likely not going to get hired because of it. And the HR stuff and the disparities there because between second chance and fair chance hiring, having that lived experience and coming into this field, doors are open. Right? Like I just had to explain 13 felonies to get my fingerprint clearance card.
Yeah.
And like, I'm getting it. And the detective who put me in prison, I put myself in prison, but the detective who investigated me and helped me get there quicker, Johnny Ilya, he wrote my letter. He also works in behavioral health.
Yeah.
You know, you're only going to see that kind of stuff in behavioral health on the lived experience side of things.
Well, corrections is my favorite population to work with. Like, I love
Well,
corrections
you're
more
in the
than
right
anything
place.
else,
Clap,
right?
clap.
Clap.
Same here. I think all of us. Probably.
I'm not sure which buttons worked.
That's great.
I have just met the most amazing people. Like my clients, and I kind of found this out by accident. I wasn't self-aware enough to figure this out on my own. I had to have a supervisor tell me this. So this came about at a place that I was working. We were having a staff meeting, and the topic was, what populations do you really love working with and what populations do you not love working with? And I was having such a hard time, and I was thinking about like all different demographics, and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I like whoever I get. Like, I don't feel like I have preferences, and I couldn't figure it out on my own. And so I asked my supervisor at the time, I said, well, what do you think? What's your observations? Like, what do you think I do best with? And I will never forget, I remember word for word what she said. She said, you work best with rough around the edges men that everybody else is afraid of. And I said, that is extremely specific. Like, how did you come up with that? like, what are you basing that on? Like, it was such a strange thing to say. And she was like, well, think about it. Think about so-and-so and so-and-so. And she started naming all these clients that I was doing work with. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. They were all like high-ranking Mexican mafia and on parole and like aggressive and scaring everybody. And I loved them. I thought they were great. And so once I like kind of recognized that, then it started to become apparent to me like, oh yeah, this is really what I love, because those clients are the most resilient, strong people I think I've ever met in my life. I mean, all clients are strong. Everybody has strengths and everybody has resilience. But with that population specifically, almost all of them have had some kind of a childhood trauma that was never resolved. Then they get into the life and there's all kinds of more trauma that was never resolved. Then they get incarcerated and there's all kinds of more drama that was never resolved. And they come to my office and they're like ready to face it and to heal. Like the strength and the courage that takes is astronomical. And it's such an inspiration. Like I get to work with these people. I think it's such an honor that they allow me to be with them in that, right? Like, cause like nobody's coming to me because they're having a great life. Like everybody comes to me because everything is falling apart and they feel like they're broken. And then they let me like walk with them and guide them into healing. And it's just the most beautiful experience ever that I'm so grateful that I get to do. I have the best job in the whole world.
What a privilege.
It is.
What
it
a
really
privilege.
is. Like I can't think of anything better
No.
to do for a living than that.
It's not like, I'm not going to name names, but I was with a therapist that I work with, and she had asked to come into my Friday group. And she works in the prisons and does all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, no problem. I know her work. She's awesome. She's got the same kind of mindset. She's in it for all the right reasons. She went in there and just absolutely crushed my group. Everybody loved her. One of the guys actually knew her from another unit. And when we were leaving, she's like, this is like literally the happiest I ever am, is when I'm inside a prison, and working with that population. And for the people that don't understand that, right? Like I know, I was talking to corrections officers, and when I talk to them, especially the newer ones, I tell my story, right? And I don't tell it in a pro-social way. I don't tell it in a therapeutic way where I'm trying to
Look good.
motivate somebody, or trying to be cool. But I tell them the story, the dark parts, the way I felt about staff, this, that. And then when I get done, I'm like, I know you don't like my story. and I know you don't have to like me. I'm completely fine with that. But my mom never did anything wrong. My son, my grandkids. And now because of staff that didn't judge me, that didn't hold all that stuff against me, that had those informal conversations with me, those people who've never done anything wrong in their life now have that family member back.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps with the compassionate, because it's pretty easy to hate us. And this isn't a feel bad for me type of stuff. Like, there's people out there who absolutely, I hope they don't, but have valid reasons for at least strongly disliking me. I'd hate for them to have to carry that around. But if you find yourself in those moments, right, with people like us, with whether it's clients, whether it's people in your circle, it's not always just for them. The ripple effects. And I talked to one of the DOC guys today that's in charge of Matt Services now. He actually did my credentialing. And we were talking about a guy who's doing really, really well now as a result of that program. And I was like, you realize like the ripple effects that you've had on this person? Because I know what his life looked like, you know, at least what he shared with me before prison. And now he's out here in a helping profession, doing this stuff. People aren't being harmed. Jeremy brought it up we talk about it pretty often. Before we leave the house, most of us, when we're active, we're committing 10 felonies. Like, in a day, that's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy. You know, walking out the door, you got the stolen car, probably a gun, some dope on you, paraphernalia. That's 4 just off the rip.
On the phone, talking about felonies.
Yeah, that's another class.
The thought process
Yeah.
has already committed 30 felonies.
Yeah, stolen credit cards, stolen merchandise.
Yeah, not to mention whoever's ID I got in my pocket.
Right. Horrible.
Well, that was another benefit too of like growing up in this crazy way that I grew up, was like I was able to very clearly see that like bad things and bad choices doesn't always equal bad person, right? Like I grew up in such a way that I was seeing people around me, you know, like for example, my father, like he did not consistently obey laws all the time. And him and his pals were doing all kinds of crazy things, right? But they were good people. So for me, like, even though I was little and young and couldn't necessarily articulate my understanding, I had an understanding that good people can do bad things and that doesn't make them a bad person.
Right.
Right. And so even a lot of the clients that I work with, they think they're bad people.
Absolutely.
They're like, I did X, Y, and Z and hurt all these people and did all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just stuff you did. That's not who you are. Like, you can choose to not do that stuff anymore and be the good person that you are, you know, and they like don't always get that. You know, it's like not apparent to them all the time.
They should definitely read Brene Brown then. that shame and guilt.
Yeah. Well, that tends to be a lot of our trauma focus too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just what happened to them, although there is a lot usually. It's also what they did to other people.
Right.
Because they've done some really nasty stuff and it's not in line with their moral compass. And it weighs on them. It kills them. It poisons them.
Yeah, it's that isolation of thought and mind that I don't, you know, that I'll never overcome. I'll never adapt. I did this, I did that. And I think that isolation, even though that isolation occurs, and I'm just speaking from experience, I still crave, just like Brene Brown taught us, beyond the shame, there is a real sense of belonging.
Yeah. You got to like connect with that in the person. Like, they're a person.
Yep.
Like, so what if they're a criminal? So what if they did X, Y, and Z in the past? It doesn't matter. They're a person. They're human. They deserve like a happy life. You know, especially when they're willing to put in the work to change all of those behaviors that is not in line with who they are. They could take over the world. I mean, they're awesome, amazing people.
Absolutely. Like you said something there. You said like deserve a happy life.
Yeah.
And I think that most people do, but we have to earn that.
Yeah.
Right. I was talking to somebody the other day, a good friend of mine, and we were talking about recovery, and he's still struggling. He's on a path back now. But I was like, man, if I could just hand this to you, I would.
Yeah.
But we can't. You have to do that work. And unfortunately, my shovel's not going to work for the ditch you got to dig or the hole you got to fill up. Which a lot of us are filling more holes than digging ditches, hopefully. But deserving is definitely something that's out there. Everybody has that opportunity, but it's not free. Everything has a cost, right? We talk about choosing your hard. Being a dope fiend was pretty fucking hard. Well, living the life I live today, you guys seen the dog today. Life is still pretty hard on this side of things, but I get to I choose this, right? So doing that work, finding what your happiness is, it's not.
Well, and the peace too.
Yeah.
They have no peace, and they deserve to have peace.
Absolutely.
So like, you know, a lot of people say like, it feels like I put down boulders that I've been carrying with me for decades, you know, and like, they deserve that. They deserve that freedom.
No.
Yeah,
But they don't always see
and
that.
part of that EMDR work is like you channel that war within that's going on within their own mind. It's pretty interesting research on that, and you know, when somebody's frozen in a room full of people, right? You know, being able to help them process that is and bring out that sense of belonging to allow them to build that connection. I think it's just something that is really cool that you're talking about when it comes to really overcoming the barriers within oneself that's kept them isolated for so long. That gives them that comfortability to drop all those rocks, you know, ready to come to you, you know, ready to hear the solution. I think that's the miracle that we're all experiencing, and for some of us, it's daily. And we get to see that in other people, and it's such a privilege. And you're right.
Really
Some of the
is.
smartest, most talented people I have met in prison.
Absolutely.
They're built different, man. They're
Or just-
100% built different. That's why, like when we talk to the guys at Cimarron, we go to a high custody yard, right? And we do a lot of work on the minimum yards, and those are, that's kind of, I'm not minimizing it, but it's just fun, kind of a cakewalk. They've already made good decisions. That's why they're on a minimum yard. Then we go to this 4-yard, and they're not there yet, right? They are not there yet, but they think that they're going to have a job at Burger King. There's nothing wrong with working at Burger King, but they think they're going to have this, you know, back to the boring or even average like life. And everybody that I see that's like us, that's turned a corner, that's found their passion. I'm not talking about just getting their job. You know, we need the survival jobs, but found their passion and their purpose.
Yeah.
People that come from lived experience, from addiction, whether it's criminal, whether it's prison, whether it's addiction, and overcome that stuff. When we turn that corner, the fucking world gets out of the way, right? People can't keep up, and it's pretty hard to stay high all fucking day, but I figured it out. I always say to 30%, it takes 30% of that effort to do the stuff that we do now. And you don't have to live like, life wasn't boring when I was in my addiction. Definitely not going to live a boring life now on this side of things, right? And sometimes I'm not so happy with those decisions, right? But it's something that we get to do, and to sit at this table on a Wednesday night and be able to have these conversations and to be vulnerable and to talk about shame and guilt. You know, you got 45 years, whatever that looks like, of prison sitting here, right? And we get up here and do this every day for work. And then we get to come on and hang out with therapists who are in recovery, and they come here and share their story. And
So,
it's just unbelievable. Man.
With
It's so
with
awesome.
all that being said, in all the stories that you have heard, what do you do for you? What
Good
do you
question.
do for you
Good
your self-care?
question. Good question. Well, I'm trying really hard to not be such a hypocrite and tell all my staff they have to do self-care and then not do self-care myself, which is what I was doing for a pretty long time.
Pretty easy to do that.
Pretty easy to do that, yeah. So lately I've really been focusing on like being a priority to myself, which feels so wrong, but it's not, right? It's not. So I'm sleeping now.
Nice. That's a good habit to get into.
Yes, it's so awesome. I love sleep. And then I'm eating nutrients that are not just like protein bars and coffee, which was what I was living off of for months and months on end. So I'm like going grocery shopping and preparing meals and eating them and like, you know, basic stuff that I was overlooking for a really long time. So I like wouldn't eat and wouldn't sleep. I was just working, and I was like, God, I feel like shit all the time. Why do I always feel like that? So I've really been focusing on that. The other thing was not isolating, because outside of work, I did nothing for a really long time. So now I'm like, let's go do fun things. Let's go to Batman escape rooms. Let's go to the state fair. Let's go do whatever, you know?
Did
And
you go
so
to the state fair?
we did go to the state
Oh,
fair.
nice.
Yes.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's where I got my giant teddy bear. I love that teddy bear.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, so just like random things, like I'm purposefully going out and socializing with people that I like, which
Right.
is, it sounds so simple and so easy, but I wasn't doing it. And I
So-
was feeling the effects of the isolation.
So not Jesse then.
No, I got to be honest. You know, one of the biggest challenges for me was that, you know, growing up with the low self-esteem, you know, that whole prison, convict, tattoos, drug dealer, that became my identity for so many years. And then like trying to heal and process all the guilt and shame and all the things that I'd done, and then having to leave that identity behind, you know, and basically having to figure out who I am, you know, because I didn't know who I was, because I'd never cared to find out, you know.
Yeah.
And that's I think equally as hard as processing the trauma is just trying to find out who you are.
Yeah, and just balance. That's hard too.
That's almost impossible.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, I worked 8 hours. That's enough for today.
Yeah.
I don't have to keep working. 8 hours is enough, right? For the rest of the day, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to watch a movie and I'm going to do whatever, you know, just balance. It's so hard.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, because I can stop working and start doing something else, but my brain
Mm-hmm.
is still, what can I do with this? What am I doing with that? Where's this going? Oh, let me just write this email, and I just get sucked right back into it.
Yeah.
So you talked about the coping skills, right? In EMDR and being able to process and move through things. You need those across the board, not just when you're sitting in a chair in a therapist's office.
Right.
You got to apply that in your everyday life, and
Right.
having those coping skills, whether you develop them in therapy or if you develop them through life, know what they are, practice them,
Use them. Yeah.
use them.
Well, and another one too is like letting people help you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so I know I'm like the worst offender. I have to be a lone ranger at all times. Right. Like nobody wants to hear my bullshit. I'm just going to deal with it myself. Right. That's how I've been living my life this whole time. But it's really hard. Like it's
Yep.
really hard to live that way. Right. Especially when you're a counselor, you should know better. Right? Like, theoretically.
Knowing
right?
and practicing are two different
Right.
things.
Yeah. And like I had an incident. It's like super embarrassing, but I'll tell you anyway. I was at work and I was having a moment and I was having a bit of a meltdown. And I was in my office crying. And one of my staff came in and caught me. I was like, oh my God, this is like the end of the world, right? Oh my God, somebody saw me crying. This is like,
Right.
this is not okay. And so I did what any like, you know, self-aware, like emotionally mature person would do. And I lied to him. And I told him, I said, I have allergies. And he said, bullshit, what's wrong with you? And so this person, he wasn't just like a random coworker. He was
Right.
actually a friend. And so I told him kind of like what was going on. And it was so helpful. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
Like it was so helpful. He was like so good. He made me feel better. I was like, wow, I don't have to be a lone ranger all the time.
It's pretty awesome.
You
isn't
know,
it?
and then of course I was like, if you tell anybody I cried, I'm going to fire you. And he was like, I'm not telling anybody shit. Don't worry about it, you know. but that was like so hard for me, right? And here I am telling my clients, just cry. It's okay. Just cry.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's okay. And then I'm like mortified that I was caught crying,
Yeah.
right? Like let people help you, you know, and let your higher power work through them. You know, that's another thing too, is like a lot of times my higher power talks to me through other people if I'm aware, right? So like in the morning when I'm aligning with my higher power and I'm asking for like guidance of his knowledge and will for me and you know, to let him guide my words and my actions and all of that. When I take the time to do that, I can pick up on messages, right? Like I can hear what he wants me to know because people will say something to me that I needed to hear, or I'll have an intuition that I'm able to trust, you know? And so like, I feel like maybe he walked in at that moment because I needed some help. My
Yeah.
higher power knew that, you know, like, so I just feel like if you have a strong, and you, in my opinion, you have to have some kind of a spiritual foundation.
Right.
It doesn't have to be religion. It doesn't have to be my beliefs. It just has to be something greater than you,
Yep.
you know, because trying to live this life in your own human power is too fucking hard. It's just too
Absolutely.
hard. You can't do it. Like you might be able to do it for a while, but you can't do it indefinitely. It's just impossible. So if you have some kind of a spiritual practice that brings you comfort and strength and understanding or whatever, like you're going to be so much better off, in my opinion.
And for people that don't understand, like people hear higher power, right, and the spiritual, and they think God or church, and it's very easy for people, especially early in recovery, to turn off to that, right?
That's what I did. Yeah.
I had it explained to me by somebody that's not what we're talking about. It could be your relationship with your kids. You know, that could be your higher power. It could be your relationship with your family. It could be literally anything.
Mhm.
And I was just like, oh, really?
Yeah.
And that really kind of opened up to me, because how I started opening my mind was playing with my grandkids. I was in prison, wasn't happening, never even met him. I don't even think she I don't even think my grandkid was on the earth yet. Like, I think he was still in her belly. But that's what I started visualizing, was playing with my grandkids.
Mhm.
And then once that opened my mind, then I started seeing the other stuff and So for the people that haven't had that light turned on yet, it doesn't have to be in a book, in a church or in the Bible or in Islam. It can be whatever
Yeah,
means
it
the
can
most to
be
you.
those things. If that
Absol-
works for you, that's fine. But
absolutely.
it doesn't have to be. It could
Absolutely.
be whatever makes sense to you. Whatever feels right to your spirit is the right answer.
Awesome. Awesome. So
Yeah,
as we,
and just be patient.
that's a tough one too.
I know.
Oh my gosh,
Balance and
bro.
patience are a
Man,
motherfucker.
I struggled so bad.
So as we start wrapping up here, before we started, you said you were a little nervous.
A little.
How do you feel now?
Still nervous.
Are you?
Yes.
Well,
This whole time I've been.
I'm surprised she even has thumbs.
I have
thought
my
she was gonna wear
emotional
'em down.
support chapstick. I needed this, so I feel better about that. But no, I've been nervous this whole entire time.
So if some of our listeners wanted some trauma therapy, what's the name of your practice and where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you?
So it's called OHR Counseling Center. It's spelled OHR, but it's pronounced like oar, like the oar of a canoe or something. And it means it's a Hebrew word that means to bring order from chaos.
Nice.
And it also means light. And I feel like that perfectly explains what we're doing in trauma therapy, right? We're bringing order from chaos. And then once that stuff is cleared away and you're free of that, your light can shine, because all of that stuff gets dimmed by the trauma and by the addiction and by whatever else. But when that's cleared away, you can be light to other people, and then they can see that it's possible, and you can like light the way for them, when they're in darkness.
Absolutely. That's
So it's
beautiful.
the perfect name. But anyway, I kind of got off topic. You can find me on LinkedIn or Psychology Today, or
Instagram.
I don't have Instagram.
So do
Facebook,
you
I
take
think.
insurance or do they have to pay cash?
Yeah, I take insurance. I've been trying to get in with Access forever, but I have not succeeded yet. Still working on that. But
Hopefully Access is listening right now and they see how awesome you are.
Yeah.
let's hope.
Yeah.
But I also take Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Cigna. I'm in the process of getting contracted with United, so that should be hopefully around April. And then they could just pay cash pay if they don't have any of those.
And where are you located?
In Mesa at Val Vista and Southern.
Okay.
Nice.
And do you have a phone number?
I do. Would you like it?
Yeah.
480-617-0235.
And if they're interested in some trauma therapy, they can call you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin. Before we go off here, what's something you want to leave everybody with today? Do a final thought. Like to
My
go around the
final
table.
Don't be a lone ranger.
Nice.
It's not worth it.
And it's way fucking harder.
It's so harder. So much.
Yep. What about you, Jess?
I would say that one of the most valuable things in my life today is the support group and the friendships that I have. I really believe that if I didn't have people in my corner that were like-minded and blazing the same trail that I'm blazing, doing the same things that I'm doing, I don't know where I would be. Having people like you and Jeremy in my life, and Joel and a bunch of my other friends that are just on this same path has I believe, really kept me from self-destructing many times. So for those of you that are new in recovery, one of the things that I would share is build a support group, because it's important.
100%. Jeremy?
So when we think about Erin, and every time I look over at her, I see a healer. So my final thought is, you have an opportunity in this light that she's talking about to walk into any room and choose to be so, right? We have a responsibility in recovery, and if it's attraction rather than promotion, then we bring that healing sense of, security to give that opportunity for someone to be vulnerable and create that space and change, just like you've done for me.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Way to take us home, Jeremy. Way to take us home. And I want to pile on to what Erin said about the Lone Ranger stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Because it could be therapeutic, right? It could be recovery based, but just like literally an hour before we started this, I got math and science classes, and I fucking hate them, and I suck at them, and I have no idea what I'm doing.
Call me.
It's terrible. I did.
Call me.
And I'm back there, and I'm doing this math thing, and Ashley comes over, and I'm like, I can't figure this thing out. And she goes, you can just do this? I'm all, no, you can't. She's all, just do it. So I do it, and I'm like, holy shit. And then she stood there and showed me like 5 more things that I could do in order to learn this material quicker. But my pride, right? The Lone Ranger mentality that I don't need to ask for help. It's a fucking math 112 class. I'll figure it out. But I'm not, and I'm struggling. And just having that little bit of, even though I didn't ask for it, that person in your life that comes over and gives that help when they see you struggling, unbelievable. You know what makes it way easier? like you said, don't be a fucking lone ranger. Do the, ask for the help.
Mhm.
So, and just great message tonight, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Aaron, we love you.
Thank you
Love
for coming.
too.
Or counseling.
counseling.
That's where it's
That's
at.
right. That's
Call
where it's
Erin
at.
Jaeger. She gave the phone number out for business purposes tonight, Jesse, just so you know.
Jesus.
But hey, we love all you guys. Thanks for being
for
here with
tuning
us
in.
tonight. We'll talk to you soon.